Hi, my name is Salema Mabena Masakela. I'll say it for you one more time. Salema Mabena Masakela. And you are listening to the What Shapes Us podcast. My dad was a jazz musician.
No way.
Yeah.
What instrument?
Trumpet player.
No way.
Look over your shoulder right there. Like that other side.
Yes.
That's him.
That's your name.
That's
Sure.
him.
And this is an album?
That is an album cover. Yeah. Yeah. One of
wow.
his 35
35.
different albums,
What
I
is
believe.
Heads
Heads Sounds. It was a group. My dad was from South Africa
Okay.
and sort of pioneered this fusion of like bebop of the late 50s, early
Sure.
60s with his traditional South African music that he grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
Came to America, went to the Manhattan School of Music,
Okay.
and got to play with and was, peers with Miles.
This is what year? 60s?
Yeah, this is like, my dad came in 59. So he's hanging
Prime time.
He's hanging out with Monk and Miles and all these dudes.
Right?
And,
The cool jazz.
Yeah.
Like, coming in at that.
and they're like, hey, it's cool that you can play our stuff, Hugh, but like, play some of that other shit. And then he kind of fused that together and ended up having a massive, massive hit in 1968. He moved to Los Angeles after he got out of school, him and his best friend that he met in college. And my father was a political exile of South Africa during apartheid.
Copy that. Yeah. Full disclosure, I lived in South Africa in 1984.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, so
so I experienced it at 14.
What were you doing there?
My stepfather, my mom ended up marrying when I was 7, was he's a proving cat, and he ended up working for some kind of multinational paper company. He had developed a chemical process for bleaching paper that did not require something to do with it. They were able to recycle the waste, and like it was cheaper, not environmentally friendly. I mean, it was environmentally friendly, but the key was that it was cheaper.
Yeah.
And so he went around the world. And South Africa was way out in the upper Transvaal, in the north, way up in the north.
Yeah.
And he'd gotten into some trouble. And so the company's like, dude, you're too crazy. If you're going to stay here, you got to bring your family to like chill out, or whatever, And because he was kind of a wild man. Anyway, I only lasted about 5 or 6 months. My brother and I got booted for, it was a whites only town. And just as American kids would, just being with the people who were cool, and having them over to the house. And, it was like we were in the redneck version of South. Like, we were in the Mississippi.
You were in the sticks
of South Africa.
You were in the Transvaal. Like, you were. You were in the like redneck end of South Africa, and they were like, "Who are these kids thinking that they could hang out with black people?"
Yeah, 2 options for my parents were: you can go to this one government military type boarding school,
right?
Or he can split, all together, but he can't stay like here, because it was just too weird. It was corrupting the white kids, because we were telling the white kids like, no, man, you can hang out.
Black kids are cool.
You can hang out with black people. Not in a we weren't trying to be subversive necessarily.
No, you were just literally being like, no, like what? That's so crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I was like, I was 14 and just got into punk rock a couple years earlier, so you're listening to Discharge and Crass and Dead Kennedys and DOA and, freaking Circle Jerk. Everything was anti what was going on there, at that thing. I mean, obviously, but it was like, just dude, it was so up. It was so
and that was a volatile time.
It was super
in
bad.
South Africa,
especially up there, like by where, there were signs, like big billboards, like scary, like propaganda billboards said like no Rhodesia here, because Zimbabwe had just, what was that, 78? This was 84. It wasn't that long of a different time between when the
right.
whites had been, get the
Run out. Yeah.
Rhodesia.
And that was the beginning of the real cracks
yes.
in apartheid that would end up ending it. Because
when did your old man get to finally go back down there?
my dad got to go back to South Africa in 90.
Okay, so pretty right.
90, yeah. And then I went for the first time in 91. But yeah, in 90 is when de Klerk, who was then president, waved the white flag and
said all the exiles can come back
home.
That must have been
to help keep the peace, right?
Right.
Because it was
okay.
The country was still like it could have just gotten burned to the ground.
Yeah.
And the exiles and the expats and the heroes of the anti-apartheid movement coming home. And as soon as my dad got the call, he was like, all right, cool. So sold his brownstone in Harlem.
Mm-hmm. Oh, he moved back.
And moved home.
Holy
moved back
home.
to South Africa.
Wow, that's
how much like heartache he had in depth of homesickness. You talk about the experience you had. He got one of the reasons why he had to leave was because he was making music with underground with white kids.
Yeah.
Which was super subversive behavior, amongst the other things that he was involved in. But like that was such a no-no that kids were finding commonality through art underground.
The thing that I remember, Eddie Grant, Electric Avenue was the biggest song at the time there. Mm-hmm. Eddie Murphy, like Beverly Hills Cop or Cop 2 or whatever, was the biggest movie there. Michael Jackson, obviously, was huge. And Mr. T, like, because they must have been playing reruns of the A-Team, or maybe it was current at that time. I can't remember. But like everything, like they were celebrating Black excellence, but not like because it was foreign.
Yes, I was going to say,
foreign, obviously.
Yeah, there was a different class viewed through the apartheid eyes of American.
Didn't they have some technical term or something? I think I want to say there was some kind of term for like foreign Black or
I'm
something.
Sure there were.
Weird,
I mean,
it's so
they had a word
codified. Nonsense.
A word in a category.
Yeah.
For everyone, but that's interesting. I mean, I think when I hear that story, it's crazy that you had this. You tell me that your daughter's a jazz drummer,
right? Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that guy behind you,
so cool,
is from South Africa, and then you have this experience there, and then I think about you talking about you having this choice because of getting in trouble of hanging out with Black kids, of either going to a military school or leaving.
Yeah.
And I imagine if your parents had been like, okay, he's going to the military school, then like you don't end up becoming
I know. I don't know what the
you don't end up becoming a dude who's making skate films and doing the things that you do.
Yeah. Because I came back to live with my buddy, not with my dad. I came back to live with my best friend and his mom. And the day I got back, his parents actually got a divorce. Like I got back, and the next night was this massive blowout in his family, and his dad split and never came.
And you're fresh back here from South Africa,
and like tripping out
next
so hard,
day.
like left my family. Like, whoa, they actually let me do it. Like the dog that caught the car, or whatever. I complained so bad, like, you got to let me go. I got to get the out of here. And they're like, okay, go live with your buddy. It's fine. And I get there, and then this family splits. I'm like, whoa.
Where was this?
Boston. Brookline, it's like West Hollywood. It's like a little town inside Boston that's surrounded pretty much.
How did skateboarding sort of, or if at all, was it a guide for you to be able to navigate?
I mean, what it is more than for me was always as a kid was an anchor, like in the best way, because came back, and I think the next day, so I come back and start freshman year of high school, and we go to school, and automatically it was in that town where I was living at that time, 8 schools, elementary schools, middle schools went to the same high school, so now it was like, oh cool, the 2 kids that kept skating past middle school from every school, now we got like 7 or 8 or whatever, And then we had friends from Dorchester and from Cambridge and, you know, places like, and then obviously the kids out in the suburbs that had the ramps or whatever. Newton, there was a ramp. So it was like, just came back and was just right into it, you know, had no like downtime or, you know, just right into taking the train, you know, taking the subway to Cambridge. I remember a kid had a quarter pipe out there. And so after school, you get on the subway and ride 15, 20 minutes to Cambridge and try and grind a quarter pipe for an hour. I mean, the most useless shit ever, but it was, as any skater person, surfer, you know, anybody will take, it's that having something that gets you to learn all this other stuff. You know, the skating in a sense, not that you know this as a kid, but as a, you know, if you're raising a kid and you're seeing a kid doing the stuff, you're like, oh, that's cool. He could be going to play f***ing hopscotch or whatever. It's that he's motivated enough to get himself, his or herself out into the world because they have something they love so much that they'll overcome the fear of getting on the subway by themselves. They'll overcome the fear of walking up to a stranger and saying hello because they're wearing a pair of Vans or whatever, you know, back in the 80s. Or they'll go to a punk show and step over like Gigi Allen in a pile of puke in the parking lot, you know, because he wants to see Black Flag or, you know, whatever. Like all these, overcome all these things because the end goal is so exciting, so amazing to do, that it's like all that other shit that's so scary and so foreign and so weird is just one more thing you got to do to be able to get to your, you know, the thing that's going to make you happy, you know, or the thing that's going to make you be, you know, when you land something, you're like, feel so good and your friends are stoked and, you know, like, and by mistake, you learn all this other cool shit.
By mistake, you end up like kind of going to a weird alternative life grad school.
Yeah, totally. You know, and you get to, I remember like at 13, and when I was still in 8th grade, we went up from Boston to Vermont to a skate contest. And one of the older kids who just got his license, who was 16, I think he was a sophomore or junior in high school, this dude, Greg DeLeo.
Greg DeLeo?
Yeah. You know?
Greg DeLeo is in Division 23, Greg DeLeo?
From Nashua.
No way.
Yeah. He drove us up there, me and my friend.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. He was God.
Wow.
When we were kids. He was 3 years older. He was the best skater in New England, pretty much, right? I mean, in the early, mid-'80s.
I didn't meet him until I got to California.
Okay, yeah. That's a San Diego guy, yeah.
Yeah.
But he was, like, besides, like, Fred Smith and the Lowens or whatever, like, of course, they were on another level because they're already, like, out of high school or whatever. But someone that was approachable to us was, do you know this little-known fact about Greg DeLeo? And speaking of Transworld, remember the logo of the dude jumping that was the silhouette for years was the logo in the 80s?
Yeah.
That's Greg DeLeo.
I did not know that.
Yeah, jumping off the big side of Boston City Hospital.
Yes. Holy
that GSD did on Boston in like 1983, 84.
That's insane.
Yeah, that was one of the things. I think I came home from South Africa and Greg DeLeo was the fucking logo of Transworld. And we were just like, oh my God, could this guy get any cooler? Yeah.
Wow.
He was like the coolest dude in the world. And he's super stylish.
Yeah.
Skater. And anyway, he had driven.
He's a great snowboarder as well. Founded Division 23 Snowboards, which was a super influential company. That was the birth of Peter Line. I could go off on a whole nother tangent. That's wild.
Yeah. He was our guy, man. And
shout out to Greg D.
Yeah. And his sidekick, Sluggo, was this other dude that had this ramp in Chelmsford, Mass. or whatever. But anyway, like I just remember going back to 8th grade and I had just gone on a road trip, you know, with this kid and we'd slept in the yard at the ramp, you know, and we saw the Godoy brothers and Fred Smith was wearing a knit sweater that his grandma had made him with a skull and crossbones on it. You know, that was just like burned into my brain. Like I remember the way that thing felt because I like touched him, you know, like when he wasn't looking, you know, like I remember this other Jeff Thompson left his Santa Cruz sweatshirt and I grabbed it because he had already left and I was like, it, I'm taking it, you know, had that shit for like 4 years. you know, like things that were just burned into my brain as a 13-year-old kid, you know, and I just felt so fucking cool as a kid going back to 8th grade, you know, and these kids, oh, what'd you do? You know, whatever, you know, did their thing. And, you know, but I was already like at that age able to feel like a part different, you know, like a part of my own scene, not dependent on like whatever the regular scene was, you know, and it just set me on this path that early.
Gives you a early independence.
Yeah.
Skateboarding, I think
it's so great for a kid to be able to see people congregate or whatever you call it, like in or around something besides nationality or color or religion or whatever, you know. It's like anything you can have, you know, and skateboarding just happens to be our thing and happens to be something that I think practices that more now certainly than before. That idea of like, hey, you know, can you rip, or are you trying to rip anyway?
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to rip, but it's you want to be around people that are at least trying to rip, you know.
You don't have to be the best.
Yeah.
You got to be, you need, like you said, you need to be trying.
Yeah.
That's when people will celebrate whatever trying means for you.
Right. And that's when, you know, you're watching things, you know, like old guys like us, you know, watching, you know, girls and women get into skating. And when did what I noticed, girls and women skating starting to take off? When they started really slamming and hitting the pavement super hard. And it's like, now it's a thing. Like now you guys are, and not that hasn't always been happening, but it happening on a bigger scale, you know, like more people just taking it to the ground, you know, and really putting it out there.
And when and how did sort of your love of skateboarding, you made a decision obviously at some point that like, okay, I'm never leaving this thing.
Yeah.
And then at some point the camera becomes your friend.
Well, okay. I always knew, you know, I had friends, even in my small circle of skaters from Boston. And then when I was later in high school, moved with my family to Oregon because that's where the paper was. And then, you know, I was never even the top 70% of my friends. You know what I mean?
Right.
I was decent and I was always trying my hardest, you know, so
right.
It's like I could hang and, you know, go to college because there was a vert ramp in Eugene, Oregon, indoors, and it's the Northwest. It rains all the time. So we all ended up, like all 7 or 8 of us in Oregon that wanted to skate, you know, ramps, ended up there in 88 in that town. And then it attracted a bunch of other people. That's where I met Mark Hubbard, you know, from Skate Park Builder and Visionary. And I already knew Red from, you know, Portland. We grew up, you know, and whatever. And and then moved to Seattle to finish college again because the skate scene was even bigger up there. And so I was always just, every decision of my life was based around like, where are we going to shred? How can we keep shredding? You know,
yes,
whatever.
More learning.
Yeah.
Also, what does the skating topography look like, and what is the community?
Yeah,
that like, seems like a good place.
How
to go
can
to
I
school.
practically continue on this journey of skateboarding? And so by the time by 95, I moved to New York City to again go to school and work in TV and film because it seemed like a cool thing to do, you know, just work in news. And my buddy had a job working in news and he's like, oh, I'll get you some work. So I got was working in news, you know, and shooting, doing sound and mostly doing sound, but getting to shoot as well sometimes. And so this is pre-computer editing, you know, but there was these editing machines at the newsroom where I worked and we could stay overnight, you know, and hack together A/B, you know, skate videos, you know, A/B and C deck, you know, and so we could make like little things and go out and film with like a high camera that I borrowed from school or whatever. And I was like, whoa, okay. So now I have a reason to be around the better skaters, you know, the best skaters I can skate to. and keep skating, but this is my reason to keep doing it, in my 20, getting up into 25, 26, I don't feel so weird about just like skating 6 hours a day as a 26-year-old college graduate trying to get a job in a life, and so no, okay. And then I reconnect with my buddy Rick, who has been my partner for 20 some odd years, making skate stuff, and he moved to New York, and he's already making films, doing little film stuff, and by 99 we're like, I'd been working TV stuff for like 4 years, 5 years, and had the skills and, knew how to put together, okay. I had to edit those packages for the news, like the B-roll packages, where they're talking about, oh, this or that, and you got to show like, if they're talking about the economy, you got to show people buying shit or, whatever.
Yeah.
So I was like, I knew how to like make things.
You were learning how to storytell.
Yeah. Basic storytelling, whatever. So it was like, it'd be really cool if we could take the stuff that we learned doing that and making skate videos, and then we could go out, we could travel, whatever. In 99, I think we came up with the idea to make our first skate film called Fruit of the Vine. And we wanted to shoot it all in film and shot on Super 8 because the Super 8 camera was only $25. And the film was, $8 or $9 a reel back then. And we shot all reversal, meaning that we could run it through a projector.
Right.
And shoot it with a camera ourselves. And so the cost was lower. And
brilliant, by the way, and also crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. But it was also a thing of like, oh, how do we separate ourselves, and make this thing? We wanted to make a thing about backyard pool skating, which is super weird in 99. That wasn't like obviously hip. It's not hip now, but it certainly wasn't hip at all then. And so it's like this totally out of it thing of skating, and let's use this old out of it kind of film to tell the story. And then bonus, we'll get to skate like 60, 70 pools. And that was and we wanted there to be two of us so that one could hold the camera, the other could skate.
Right.
And then the other one would hold the camera, the other one skate, because like there was no point in making a skate film if you weren't going to be able to skate. Like that was the idea.
That was the bonus.
That was the bonus. You'd make way more money going to make a different kind of film. If you're just going to hold the camera and be a passive observer, it's like, go make more money. I can make more money doing news.
Right. More money, but a ton less fun.
Yeah. So the idea was to have fun and make films. And so, yeah, that first one actually did pretty well, strangely. We were selling it, making $10 a copy. We'd sell it wholesale, and we'd make $5 if we sold a wholesale, $10, whatever. End up selling, I don't know, 35,000. Yeah, 30,000, something like that, 35,000 altogether over like a year and a half.
Yeah, that's I'm not a mathlete, but that's
enough money that two of us could not work in the news for several months out of the year, which is pretty rad. And so then it's awesome. Like, ooh, that's like drugs. You got a taste. Now I'm living in New York, going to California for a few months a year, paid. We're paying, but it's still, we had saved money, and then we're making something, coming back, selling it, and taking time off from work and living out the proceeds of making a skate video, and
how did you come up with the name of Six Stairs?
Six Stair was when we got our studio here in LA. By 2003, we moved out to LA, and we had made like 3 films by then, and we got on a sponsored by Tylenol with like Tony Trujillo, Jana Mayan was the snowboarder, wow. Travis Rice.
Wow.
Joel Tudor. This guy, Dave Young, was the BMXer who first got to do a loop on BMX.
Yeah.
Tobin Yellen was the photographer, and we were the filmmakers of the campaign. And so we're like,
that was your first commercial gig?
Pretty much, yeah. And it got us enough money to move out here from New York, which was the dream, because now we're like 32, 33, 34. And we're like, dude, we don't have that many summers left. We can't be sitting in New York 6 months a year, not skating. This so we came out here to skate like all the time or whatever. And so that worked. And when we got our studio on Fairfax, directly across the Fairfax Ave is this little park where there's a little Six Stair. And we're like, that's about like what we can ollie, like It's just a joke.
That's what we have left.
Yeah.
6 stairs.
Yeah. And it was like
Not 16.
And there's like, backyard pools have 3 stairs, and there was 2 of us, so we're like, just, I don't know, whatever.
It's brilliant.
And it was like a dumb name that didn't mean anything, because it was so hard to name something that means something in a way. Like, that's a weird thing. Like, it's got some other connotation than but if you use 2 words that don't make any sense to other people, then it doesn't bring any baggage with it.
Yeah.
So I think that was part of it too.
And it instantly breeds curiosity.
Right.
As well.
Everybody's like, "What? How do you spell it? What does that mean?" Whatever. So it's like, oh. And it was just the stupid thing that we saw outside of our studio, every day. And Mike Carroll ollies it, and yeah, right, like, because he's like leaving his house probably, because he lived right down the street probably. But yeah, so by 2005 or 6, we had that studio. We just moved out last month. So it was 17 years. We were in the studio there, and we moved out, and just the realities, now, you can edit. Like, my partner Rick is in Mexico right now. We're going back and forth on an edit, and he's in Mexico surfing and hanging out, and and just like, send me I can send him.
Doesn't require all of the things.
He hasn't got kids. What the do you want to be going into a studio every day,
Right.
And he's doing his own thing, and, so working on project, it's just like studio it went from being like, oh my God, this is so amazing, to like, this is kind of necessary, in this day and age.
Yeah.
The amount of gear that you need is so much. You rent, you're going to buy a $70,000 rig, for camera. Like,
no, you rent it.
You can rent it, because who knows what the person, if you're doing high end stuff.
Yeah.
I love having film cameras and weird old VHS cameras. And, I love I have so many old cheap cameras, because I love shooting those.
Which have become very cool.
Yeah. And then it's like, hey.
And you can't duplicate. There's no filter.
You
can.
Yeah. I mean,
it's so cool to see the way that is come back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, that's the root of your filmmaking.
Yeah. It's fun. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's in the journey, from, I don't know, 99 to now, just,
it's insane.
Yeah. And being able to live, it's that thing of like, we never intended to make films for everybody. We intended to make really cool films for people that would be really stoked on those, and hopefully bring in some other people too, because try and make them appeal to a wider audience, and relatable to a slightly wider audience, whatever. So yeah, it's been like living off that, like just little bits here and there, and fitting in. And,
I love, like, we got a job at the news station. We hack the equipment at night for our own use. Yeah. To make skate videos. Make a movie that no one is supposed to care about, especially when you made it.
Yeah, our friends
99, 2000, to make a movie about pools. Like, what? And then to do it with a Super 8 camera.
Yeah.
I was having a conversation on another podcast about the idea of when we see, it used to be that when you saw something different, everyone had to stop and be like, wait, that's different, which is what happened to you.
Yeah. No, we got
intentional.
We made this video. We were going to make 500 copies of the VHS tape, because it's like just before DVDs were like, they were out, but you weren't making them,
right?
For little runs or whatever. It's like a big deal, to make a DVD in 99 still. So we're like, okay, we'll make 500. Then we figured out, it's almost the same price to make like 2,000, because you got to make 2,000 covers anyway.
Right.
You can't get less.
That was the minimum.
Yeah. The minimum, the printer wouldn't print less than 2,000 boxes.
Right.
So it's like, okay.
Roll the dice and make 2,000 of them.
Make 2,000. Okay. Those sold out like in like 2 weeks or whatever. We're like, holy shit. We did a tour. We toured it around. People were like, whoa, this is so trippy. This is cool. Like a month later, half page write up in Rolling Stone magazine. We're just like, what the actual or maybe it was like 3 months later. It had to have been 3 or 4 months later. But I think Johnny Knoxville was on the cover, Yeah. So it was like a skate weird, Rolling Stone magazine. But still, at that time,
huge. Rolling
Stone was like, I remember the fact checker calling and be like, okay, did you really skate 70 pools in the thing or whatever? Like, yeah, I guess, whatever. And And that like, then like, I think from there, like Blue Torch TV called and like, hey, you want to make a couple like travel films, you know? Or like, are you serious? Like, yeah, we went right to Ecuador like, and took a crew of 14 people to Ecuador like literally a month later, and was like, okay. And then we did another film for him or whatever. And it's like,
That's incredible.
And that's how we, Mark Waters was the early guy that like helped us get money from Etnies for a second film that we made called Northwest, about all the guys, Red and Monk, and those guys building parks up in the Northwest in like 2002 or whatever, you know. And it's that thing of just like, you know, you throw an idea out there and hopefully, you know, one or two people, you know, take it and are psyched on it. And
here you are 25 years later.
It's exactly the same now. It's like someone will call like, hey, I was just like, I'm just doing this job right now. And it was somebody had seen a film that I made about the band SSD from Boston. They just came out with this record label, Trust Records. And this dude, Lee Spielman, who's in that band Trash Talk, had seen it, was stoked on it. I mean, he had helped me get that job actually, as a matter of fact, too. But he told this other dude who was looking like, hey, I need somebody to help me do this trippy like photo thing, whatever. He's like, oh, you should call Buddy, you know. And it's like still the exact same as like one person, like, hey, you're doing cool shit, or, you know, something.
It's cool to see like even like the range now of your YouTube channel and the shows that you guys are doing, continuing to adapt, but still in that same earnest, raw, and gritty style that got you here. Folks, people who are watching, definitely check out the Six Stairs YouTube. Yeah, I have to ask. Yeah, Janelle Monáe.
Yeah, that was another one person thing.
Okay, so I interviewed her, I think 2007. I had a show at
she's, by the way, obviously I didn't become like friends with her or anything, but I was with her and around her for 3 different videos, you know, or spent some time up at Wonderland.
Did you shoot the pool one?
Yeah.
Oh my Lord.
I mean, so this is what happened. Like,
what's the song? It's
Lipstick Lover.
Lipstick Lover, like, which said that beautiful Jamaican vibe.
So I went and this dude called me out of nowhere.
I need this story.
I forget how this photographer, Mason Rose, got my number from somebody and it's like, hey, I'm just trying to do this test and, you know, would you come down and help me? I heard you have a lot of funky cameras and it would be really cool. You know, he was shooting photos. He's like, I just want to put something together for this test and try and package it and make, you know, get this client. And if I get the big client, then I'll obviously hire you or whatever. You know how it goes. Testing, you know, and I'm like, yeah, Thursday. Sure. I'm not doing nothing. Let's do it.
You did not reveal who the client is.
What's that? No, because it didn't happen. It doesn't even matter. But I don't even remember if he told me, but I didn't care. He's like, come down to this space or whatever. I'm like, it's cool. Went down and shot it, super fun. And he was like, oh my God, we clicked right away. Super stoked. And had so much fun. And then didn't hear, you know, whatever. Oh, it didn't happen. Yeah, no, whatever. We, you know, made a new friend. And that was super cool. And then like 2 months later, he's like, hey, you want to come and shoot a bunch of Super 8, you know, and weird other stuff with this album cover that I'm shooting. He shot the underwater photo. This guy, Mason, shot the album cover.
Brilliant.
And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And he sends me the brief and it's this underwater shot. And I'm like, dude, I got an underwater Super 8. And he's like, oh, shit, bring it. And so I walk in there not knowing like Nate Wonderful and Josh and all these dudes are crazy film freaks. They love shooting film. Janelle loves Super 8. They all love Super 8. They like vinyl. They like, you know, analog. That's what they're into. And so I just stumble in with like 8 cameras and like 3 VHS cameras and a high 8 camera. And I had my assistant shooting some stuff. And they're just like, who the is this dude? You know, or whatever.
Like you were sent from the beyond.
And they were so stoked. And I had extra cameras with me. And I was like, here, take this one. Nate's over there shooting, you know, and this was just for stuff, you know, for like a press kit, you know, or whatever for the making of the album cover. You know, they're just going to release on. I think they put out a couple Instagram posts with it or whatever. And then I get a call back like 2 weeks later from.
I remember the Instagrams now.
Yeah. And I get
a call. Breaking the internet with every single post. And I remembered that feel.
Yeah.
The tone and the texture of it.
Because it was what they already liked, but they had gotten back some film and they were using cameras that, maybe were just a little bit lower quality that we all love, but it's just like for what they want it between, like kind of clean, but still kind of raw.
Yeah.
And just unbeknownst to me, I happened to waltz in and be exactly that. They were already doing it. They knew what they wanted. I was just a vessel that was happened to be like a couple years ahead of what they were into. What they were already. They knew, they want, and they're like, "Oh, you're doing cool, do it."
It's like we're looking for the bass player to play this. We know the sound,
And the dude walks in, he's like, "Oh, I already."
That's and everyone's like, "Oh, that's our guy."
And so, got the footage back. I'm like, "Oh my god, it's all exposed." This is what they tripped on. It's all exposed correctly. It's all in focus, and it's not shaky. Now, I'm using a bigger Super 8 camera, heavier. Yeah. And just not moving because I'd learned years ago not to fucking move a lot, or whatever. Yeah. And so 2 weeks after that press thing, I get a call from this dude, Alan Ferguson. And Alan Ferguson is like one of the gnarly music video directors from the 90s, and then came back and made a bunch of music videos, was married to Solange for a few years. And it's just like another fucking Zen mat. I could work under this dude like every day. He's so amazing. Like when shit wasn't going, he'd pick up a iPhone and just start shooting. Like fuck it, I'll put it in the video. I don't get you guys aren't ready. I'm moving on. He sees the shot. He's like he doesn't care. He really he is a director. Like he's skating. Like he's just so. I can't say enough good things about this dude, Alan Ferguson. He's so cool. He calls me and he's like, "Joe, what's up with your?" I hear these guys yapping on Buddy this, but I got to meet who this Buddy guy is, man. I'm like, well, come over. He's like, for real? And he's like, all right. And he comes over like an hour later. He's at the studio. And we just sit there and hang out for like 2 hours. He's like, man, at the end, he's like, dude, I really like your vibe, man. You got to come shoot these videos, or whatever. And I'm like, all right. And then they end up hiring a DP to do like the big, like real, like music video we shot. This woman, and I'm blanking on her name, but super great DP, 16 millimeter. And, but obviously it's taking, these are like shots with like 12 dancers and and they're taking, of course they take 2 hours, an hour and a half to set up, they're like complicated with a choreographer and, they got a killer choreographer there.
Layers and just the whole thing.
But Alan is more like, okay, cool. He's got like 6 of those shots he wants.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we're cracking off like 5 shots every 10 minutes. He's like grabbing, literally, he doesn't even care. He's grabbing me like this. I got 2 cameras, a 16 millimeter and a Super 8 in each hand, one in each hand.
Yeah.
And then
we're shooting pools.
Yeah, exactly. And then interspersed are these beautiful, real Super 16. And the thing where I was so stoked is the DP obviously shot Super 16, 69. Yeah. The video came out 4:4,
right,
square, the way I was shooting,
right.
So I was like, I was like, I was so stoked on that, and not taking anything away from the woman that shot she's amazing, and it's credited as the DP,
right?
Because she came up with the lighting, and whatever.
Your sauce and seasoning is.
My point
all
was
over
just that it was super fun working with Alan, and it was like, and then we did the next time, maybe 3 weeks later, we did another one out in Palm Springs called Water Slide. Same thing. He had, they had written all their stuff, and Janelle was pointing here and there and directing,
Yeah.
I think she co-directed probably because, but she's so quiet, like the way she directs and keeps control of everything is just like, she just knows and she whispered to somebody just, and everything's happening the way she wants it to happen, like she's the guru at the end of the day. And the next one, same thing, just run and gun. Shot, I think, 2 music videos in one day. I don't know if the third one ever came out, but in 2 days. Sorry, two videos in 2 days. But that was like such a cool experience to work on that, on a different kind of music, but exactly the same vibe as, like you said, shooting a pool session, because you're just scrambling. You don't know what's going to happen next. Or any kind of session. And And it was so fun to vibe with somebody on something completely different, and they're vibing exactly the same, you know, on like, whoa, this guy's cool, you know, or whatever. And I look back, my assistant was shooting video. Here's this like pasty white dude in the pool with like, I was wearing like short shorts and like bald, and I'm like in there with the camera, and in the video, I'll send it to you later. But I'm like shooting 16. I got a Super 8 over here. I'm shooting 16, and these girls, you know, like most beautiful women ever assembled for a video. Zero business being there
ever in life, and you're just sitting there in. Please send.
I'm gonna send you the clip. You're gonna die. You're gonna die.
Holy
clip! Like just I don't even have to tell people where I am. I'm like, oh, there you are. That's you.
That's
anyway.
awesome.
So that was like those, you know, those moments in life that reaffirm like everything, like, oh, I'm in the right place at the right time. Like finally I'm just doing, like, no thinking, like I'm just doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing right this second, you know, or whatever. And that was one of those rare experiences, you know. I mean, I've been like on an anti-hero trip in New Zealand or whatever, and you're camping in a dry riverbed and you're waking up and, you know, and start shooting the second you wake up of people, you know, and you're just like, oh, this is like perfect, you know, this is like exactly what's supposed to be going on in my life, you know. Like, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm like in my
it is so clear that this path was yours before it was yours, and the manner in which you've, you know, just chosen to step into it in the same way that you have from the very beginning.
Yeah.
You know, have you where you are today.
It's there's few, you know, I was telling
Thank you for skateboarding.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds so crazy, you know, like to talk to normal people or whatever, you know, as a 50-something-year-old dude, you know, I'm in my early 50s and talking to people and like, yeah, and I owe my life to skateboarding. They're like, say what now? You know, like that's kind of a weird thing. I'm like, I still, whether I'm shooting, skating, or anything else, everything in skateboarding informs like everything. Just like I said, that idea of being 12, 13 years old and getting on the subway, and because there was a higher purpose, you know, of like getting to the thing, and having the feeling, you know, you know, and
you know, my story is really similar in that the thing found me and then I couldn't let go of it.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, after working at a bunch of different brands, etc., working at Transworld, and like I said, I found the mic.
Yeah.
Being able to storytell it. And
yeah.
I was sitting next to Dave Duncan one day at the vert ramp at ASR, at the old trade show in San Diego, and he wanted to go hang out with some girl.
Yeah.
And I would always sit and watch and study him.
Yeah.
One day I was like, you know, and we would talk, and I'd always make sure I was there and go watch him.
Yeah.
He was he really was an artist at the height of his announcing.
Incredibly so. Like,
and he still is, you know, like his style of live announcing. Like, yeah, shout out to the daggers and Dave Duncan. But one day he said, all right, you can do this show, Salema. Like Sal. I went by Sal at the time. He's like, don't f it up.
Yeah.
And I had that microphone, and I was like, it was like, okay. And I just blacked out.
Yeah.
And he came back. There's a full crowd. People are stoked. I'm shouting out all the different booths, et cetera, et cetera. And from then on, they started splitting time between the two of us. And it was a little salty at first.
Yeah.
And that wasn't my intention.
Sure, of course.
But he would eventually, you know, I always tell him to this day, I'm like, I wouldn't be doing any of this, dude, if it wasn't for you.
Yeah.
You put that mic in my hand that one day, and everything like that I watched my pops do, et cetera, and, you know, it kind of lit up in me, and I try to stay as close to it as I can as a storyteller. And here we are sharing stories.
That's so cool, man.
This is truly, truly special, man. Thank you so much.
It's been super fun.
Yeah, really, really fun. Couldn't have asked for better.
Nice.